the year. Because if it doesn't generate a return, we're not going to have the next $400 million. So our experience in the US, in many markets, not just in Silicon Valley, if you look at New York, where it's become now the second biggest ecosystem, if you look at Boston, if you look at Canada, which is now an emerging ecosystem, consistently that ratio shows that a very small percentage of companies turn into big outcomes, and the median outcomes don't matter. You need big outcomes. You need companies and entrepreneurs to think big.
I think there is a myth among a lot of young people who graduate from universities that what it takes to have a great startup is a great idea. And I think if you look at your statistic, essentially 1% of ideas get funded. So ideas are a dime a dozen. What you need to succeed is, in addition to an idea, relevant experience, that will basically make sure that you are solving a problem that the market will pay money for. And you need a complete team, not just one individual, a complete team that will work to make a company successful. We Lebanese tend to be somewhat individualistic and tend to basically think that because we thought of the idea, that's kind of the key to success. And correct me if I'm wrong, but VCs are always very interested in not only who the leader is, but who the team is, because that's really a critical part of the formula to succeed.
So my views on it are Circular 331 was a huge step forward. It's not enough, quite frankly. The money is not, it's the first starting point, but you have to take into account our position and situation in Lebanon for a second, right? So first, there's not enough education within the colleges or post-colleges around focused on taking the risk and the startup ecosystem. So that's one issue that needs to be focused on and resolved, I believe, as part of the 331. The second and most important is really the actual size of the market in Lebanon. So today, we're here, but we've spent most of our lives here, right? We're working, for instance, at our company, our markets are the US, Europe, and eventually Asia. If you're a student or a young entrepreneur in Lebanon and haven't really traveled anywhere, and you have an idea that you want to take to market, even if it's one of the best ideas, to start with, the market is small. So what we need to do is focus on how do we get access to external markets, the US, through groups like Labnet, for instance, through a lot of the other groups in Canada and Europe, that provide the platform for the go-to-market strategy, which is non-existent right now. We're doing it because we're US-based. And then last but not least is also providing a framework for an exit, right? Right now, from everything that I've read and I've discussed, and I've had many discussions, our investors are Lebanese investors. Quite frankly, none of the foreseeable exit strategies for startups as part of the circular make any sense to me.
So you're talking about accessing global markets as opposed to the local markets to sell your products, which is obviously a huge requirement for thinking big and for having a big impact. But I want to go back a little bit to how do we create more opportunities, more companies on the ground. Correct me if I'm wrong. You started in the US and you actually moved back or moved part of your operations to Lebanon. You're employing engineers locally. They're creating products. They're developing software. One of the ideas that we've all been debating is don't just look at the starting of the companies in Lebanon, but tap into the expat community, not ask them to move and to take the risk of walking away from the global market, but expand your operations into developing products, hiring locally, and more importantly, training locally. Because a lot of this engineering talent is coming out of great universities with great academic training, but not real-world training. How are you doing that?
So it's a daily struggle. I mean, you have to just stay in the game. It's my team and myself travel quite often back to Lebanon. We've invested very heavily in training our engineers and our quality assurance departments. since we've actually financed the company through the circular, we went from having 12 people in the Beirut office to 42 people in about 18 months or so. A very interesting statistic, I was talking to our HR director, we've interviewed over 250 candidates in the last 18 to 24 months. Our hire rate has been about 12 to 15%, because we're very specific on communications, engineering, et cetera. So that's a pretty low rate when you look at the overall number of people that we're interviewing, which means to me that there's still an educational side to the equation that needs to be put in place as part of this circular to also make the talent more attractive, right? So I agree that you need to go back and tap into the talent pool, but you can't forget also that you're serving markets abroad, and you need to make sure that you have the right talent and the right communication skills, et cetera, developed.
So I know that someone is taking notes here to kind of aggregate all the ideas. I think this is, as a first idea, of tapping into the diaspora, pitching them on expanding into Lebanon, but I think the formula of explaining to them how to do it legally, how to potentially tap into the 331 money as investment in return for doing that, and how to hire people locally is key. Please.
Yeah, thank you. So I spent 25 years in technology in Silicon Valley, and I started a company from zero. The models that are in Silicon Valley today, we can copy in Lebanon. Even though the 331 is a great idea, but only guarantees 75% of the investment, there's the other 25% that someone is going to take the risk. In my opinion, that someone should be the universities in Lebanon that partners up, because all the graduates are smart people. We have the human resources in Lebanon. If they create the office space, like a model in Silicon Valley called plug and play, which they created office space and they became similar to venture capital, where they come in and they partner up with ideas and they open up the space and they put different startups all on one floor. Companies like PayPal, Dropbox, and similar companies all started from there, and they're all success stories. So if we create such a space, and again, what we're trying to do is lower the barrier to entry, make it easy for people with ideas to go out and implement their ideas. How do we do that? We give them office space, we give them technology, we give them areas to work, and we give them interaction with different companies, in addition to the capital. That, together with 331, will change the whole model in Lebanon, in my opinion. Thank you.
So just commenting on why is it difficult sometimes why is it difficult to scale the number of companies and to scale the company?
To put that in context for a second, in the case of Tariq, he started here and expanded into Lebanon. In the case of Rabia, he started in Lebanon and expanded into the US.
I was in the US, then in a previous lifetime. Then I went to Lebanon, I established, then I came back here. So, for example, one of the challenges that startups find, let's say in technology, is the access to markets. Now, we have access to the Arab Gulf markets and regional markets, but that still requires a certain amount of effort, expenditure, business development, longer sales cycles. We do not have a local market. Now, one way to see that, in every market, the government is usually the largest, let's say, in IT, let's say. It's the largest spender, usually. The government is the largest spender in IT. We don't see in Lebanon, let's say, initiatives to favor products that are created by Lebanese companies. Creating a quota, for example, that can inject, because that's important. I mean, 331 is great. We benefit from 331. We've had investments from MEVP, Veritech Fund, etc., all the funds. But it would be good also to have customers. In my case, I don't have that particular need now, but I'm saying in general, if I'm a startup and I'm creating an IT product, why don't I have access to local markets? Okay, the market is small, but there's space for the government to spend something on that. For example, in Brazil, at some point, maybe 10 or more than 10 years ago, they standardized on open source. So all government agencies were using open source whether for office software or for their servers, etc., creating 100,000 jobs for local entrepreneurs in the country. That's one. The second one, we pat on our backs all the time that Lebanon has great universities and we have talent and all that. Fantastic. We do, I mean, Lebanese are competitive and they like to learn and they're hard workers. The universities are okay. I mean, let's not also let's not make that sound better than it is. We have okay university, as in what a graduating student comes out from university. However, we do not have neither the culture nor the industry to create senior people. It's happening now, but if we move a few years back, that did not exist. If a company like, I mean, one of the companies that I started was 13 years ago, and when I went back to Lebanon, and I needed senior engineers and architects and CTO and all that stuff. Those did not exist in Lebanon because the Lebanese that are, I mean, fulfilling these functions, I mean, we have a lot of amazing executives in Silicon Valley, in Europe, etc., but they're not in Lebanon. I had to import people. And well, I failed to import Lebanese, so I don't have a visa issue. So I started with the teams that I've worked with previously. Like, I mean, I had Americans and Brazilian and Italian, like, you know, an international team. Just bringing them back to Lebanon to work with me and getting them visas was impossible, for example. And that's something people do not look at, but it's important.
So two things specifically also for the people taking notes. I heard we need to get government institutions and potentially large corporations, the banks in Lebanon, committed to buying locally. A startup's biggest challenge right after raising money is getting their first customer, because everybody's afraid of buying from a company that's developing a new product that no one else is using. I'll give an example of an initiative that New York City did in creating the digital media industry and subsequently the fintech industry. The New York City Investment Fund created something called the New York New Media Association, and then created something called the Fintech Innovation Lab. Those are two organizations that brought together all the big corporations in those sectors into a specific board. The Fintech Innovation Board has 5 VCs and 20 of the top CIOs, the chief investment officers, from all the big banks in New York. Everybody and entrepreneurs selling new products in fintech. Put everybody in one room, and every year they accept 5 to 10 companies into this program, where the people, all the buyers of fintech products at those banks, are there with an incentive to buy from these companies and to help them build their product with the objective of creating the fintech industry in New York. They did exactly the same thing in digital media. They brought all the advertising companies, all the media companies, and the investors all under one roof, where everybody was there with the notion of everybody's taking risk together to create that industry, because ultimately, if it works, everybody benefits. So I think Rabia's idea of bringing the big buyers of products that are already based in Lebanon with the notion of buy locally before no one gets fired for buying an IBM or a Microsoft product. But if you're buying from a product that's built by a local company, work with them on developing it and take the risk would be a huge factor forward. I want to go back a little bit to Paul. You're involved with LAU, I believe. And there's one, back to the question about how do we create new startups and new companies. Universities typically play a huge role. Stanford has been a huge incubator of new ideas in Silicon Valley. Cornell Tech now is doing it in New York. Harvard has done it in Boston. What can we do? What should universities like LAU, like AUB, like USG do to get those teams that Majid was talking about to be working together to come out of those universities with a business plan as a team that the investors can look at backing?
I think there's actually, if I may really make 4 points, because a 4-point answer, I think the first 2 questions plus this one also at the same time. If you look at Lebanon, there's two kind of startups. There's a startup that are ground up. They start something completely new from the ground up, and they're usually the one completely innovate, and the one who really has the most success of success. And the second startup are the one who would like to emulate something that already exists. And so somebody, for example, Bank of Beirut become a great success story. Well, if Mr. Fair can do it, I can do it. And this is the kind of attitude, and he's an extraordinarily brilliant person, extraordinarily successful. It'd be very difficult to compete against him and really get, and get something new. The problem is in Lebanon is our society is more prone to favor ideas similar to one we already know are successful than to gamble on something entirely new. And that's, I think, is a big issue. Yet we need to nurture inspiration, not replication, more than replication on this one edge. So if the startup can find a niche market, differentiate themselves from the competition and increase their switching costs, of course, the reward is huge. So we need entrepreneurs who increase their chance for success, are the ones who are already focused, they're really focused and drive, who are looking for gaps or what's missing in the marketplace that they can fill. So they look for problem to solve, they look for painkiller, not vitamins. People, that's the way to success. And then cultivate the skills, passion, and talent to solve them. So that's one issue. The second point I'd like to make that most investors who are smart investors, they only want to invest in companies that have the highest proven chance of success, because not only they want to get their money back, they also get a return on investment. However, that means that we will have disproportionate fewer opportunity for entrepreneurs who haven't been able to attract an initial client base or a following on their own. So that's another issue. The third one is about the government, and you mentioned that. I think it's fantastic that the government is putting this money. But again, Your Excellency, the government is definitely a key enabler for entrepreneurial ecosystem. However, its role cannot be limited to giving out grants and loans. It needs to create an effective. So the government role, if you look at the latest 2016 World Bank Ease of Doing Business, out of 189 economies, Lebanon ranks very quite low on ease of doing business at 123, to give you an idea. Where starting a business in Lebanon ranked also low at 114 out of 189. I understand you were Minister of Electricity. Getting electricity is ranked at 116 out of 189. Getting credit is ranked at 109 out of 189. So that's the first thing you need to do, is really improve. That's the most important thing, is the ease of doing business. What I heard today from Mr. Zer is incredible, because he's changing this ranking of 109, by having the Bank of Beirut helping this. That's going to grow it to be much lower number, which would be fantastic, to bring us to the top. The top right now, by the way, is Singapore, just to let you know, and the second is New Zealand, which is very interesting. So that is very, very important. This is the 2016, by the way, World Bank Ease of Doing Business. So you can Google it, and they have about 12 different categories, and you can see them. But getting electricity is 109, and that's something very important. Another very important category is how to export. What is the ease of export? And again, we rank over, I think it was 134. So that's almost at the bottom of the 189. So that's very, very important. And the fourth thing is about what's very important you just mentioned, and I would like to address it very quickly, is universities. The key of success, if you look at the top 5 global startup, ecosystem in the world, is number 1 is Silicon Valley, number 2 is, of course, New York City, number 3 is Los Angeles, number 4 is Boston, number 5 is our neighbor from the south, number 6 is Chicago, then Seattle, then Berlin, and then Singapore. So these are the top 10. So the surrounding entrepreneur ecosystem is very, very important. And we don't have any supportive technology park, also innovation centers. That's where I think university can play the biggest critical role. And I think LEU is looking at that, to be honest with you, to do it in Byblos, in Dajbel, location over there, because you need to have a business incubator. That's the whole idea. And if you have that, then that would be a huge success story, for that. Look, if you look at, for many, many years, Lebanon has been struggling with the problem that is called brain drain, right? Where or the immigration of the most talented, if you want, citizens, those with that potential to create startup. Because what startup is not, you're moving from a job seeker to a job creator. And that's a completely different, important. And then as a result, you can hire talented professionals. But you need to be able to retain these talents, so you must have the environment that most favor these young entrepreneurs. And startups are the essence, of course, as you know, of entrepreneurship. And Lebanon can be a country that not only export, that need to be able to export patent and innovation, not just workforce. And I think that's the key. And that's but that's going to require the university and also the government to enable this. It's both together. So if there is no ecosystem that, that can support the generation of innovation in Lebanon, no matter what we do, the 400 million or 800 or a billion, even more, it's going to fail. Because right now, if you look at the numbers, it's 99% of all startup fails. So again, and that's, again, it's a culture in our country. We don't like failure. And the only thing you're going to succeed if your startup is going to fail a lot and learn a lot. It's all about failing fast, fail cheap, and fail forward. The more you fail, that's how you're going to learn and move forward. So again, the culture has to little change also that help us on this.
So I'll come back to culture in 1 second, but Majid, I want to ask you, you run one of the most important companies of the internet landscape in the US, Comscore, which is the currency to a lot of what's happening in digital media. What would it take for companies like Comscore, for companies like Cisco, and George, I know that you were a big champion of expanding Cisco's operation in the region, to open centers and employ people in the country? What do you need to see from the government institutions, and how do you address the political and stability issues that undoubtedly you'll have to face with your board when you make a decision like that?
Well, I tell you, we would love to employ lots of engineers and lots of people in Lebanon. We probably have at least 200 people that we employ in Eastern Europe, in Argentina, in India, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't we go to Lebanon? Well, first issue is you don't even know whether the freaking electricity is going to be there. You don't even know whether you're going to be able to communicate with your staff. You don't even know whether your office would be open one day and then shut down the next day. So there is that stability that basically stops you. I think that there is another big issue, which is that in Lebanon, we have a lot of students that graduate, but they don't really have experience. If you give me a student that's just coming out of school without to make a whole lot of progress. A lot of companies have solved this problem. India, our neighbors to the south, their initial foray into this is to basically figure out a way to retain these people in the country and give them experience. What do people in Lebanon do? They basically immigrate. The minute they graduate, they emigrate somewhere else. So a while back, probably about a month ago, I wrote a memo to Labnet saying what we ought to do is create the Infosys of Lebanon. Infosys is one of the biggest IT companies in the world. It's based in India. It started as 20 or 50 employees that basically got a contract out of a US company, and they started basically doing IT implementation work for them. And my notion was that and you can build a company like this that could employ eventually 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, depending on how big it is. We have enough people in the diaspora that we can influence our companies to basically say, all right, we're gonna take a risk and hire 20 people, 30 people, and by collectively, with little investment, probably less than $5 million, you can create an entity that can grow, and over time, over the space of 3 to 5 years, build that middle management experience that allows companies to be able to go to Lebanon, open centers, be able to depend on experienced middle management. And I think that the formula should be very, very clear in terms of what a startup needs to succeed. A startup that starts in Lebanon and stays in Lebanon will not succeed. A startup that starts in Lebanon and goes to Dubai, that's not going to have an exit. That's not going to be a big success. If you want to be a global company, you have to come and prove yourself here. And so if that's the case, then you have to have a strategy with two branches. A branch here or in London or someplace, and a branch in Lebanon. The engineering happens in Lebanon. The commercial aspect happens on a world stage. But in order for the engineering to happen in Lebanon, we don't need to just have students just graduating from schools. We need people who have had 3, 4, 5, 7 years of experience that can actually take on project, lead them, and bring them to fruition.
And I would,
You spoke very well. This is exactly where we're missing. And when time permits, I'll talk to you. This is called internship program. Internship program for Lebanon. It was created by Cisco in 2016. It was a success, and we need to replicate this.
And in reality, if we actually put our mind to it, it's not a big investment to create this.
and one way to maybe address the frustration that we're hearing from a few people on when's the electricity going to come in, when can we talk to our people, is there enough broadband to have video conference systems? One idea to be thrown out that few of us deliberated is thinking about some sort of a special economic zone that's literally a physical, geographical economic zone that has a guarantee from all the parties on the ground that all these services are constantly delivered to that zone and guaranteed that all of that infrastructure is delivered at the standards of what we see in the rest of the world. I want to come back to the culture question a little bit that you posed, Ari, and then we'd like to run a video after this question from one of the panelists who couldn't join us today, Tony Fadel, who's the founder of Nest, which has been a huge technology company exit in the US, and Tony has a couple words for the panel. But on the culture piece, and that's another thing that I think is a big issue for us to preempt rather than fall in a trap. If you follow again the math that we talked about before, in a portfolio of 30 companies, 3 generate the returns, and 20 to 30% of them fail. Fail means shut down, everybody gets fired, the entrepreneurs move on to doing something else. We don't yet have the culture in Lebanon to accept that failure. The families and the parents of these young people starting new companies are not going to take it easy when their kids have to shut down their companies and fail in a society that frowns on this. Yet it's it's such an ingredient of entrepreneurship. If you're not willing to fail, you're not an entrepreneur, full stop. So I personally think that it's incredibly important to start publicizing today to the market, to the population at large, to the press who's monitoring how this $400 million is being spent, to expect that we're going to see these failures before we see the successes. Because you'll recognize the failure much faster than you recognize the success. The successes take longer to breed. And it's important to expect that this is going to happen for the entrepreneurs to take the right risk to make things happen. And if you guys want to add something, because you're fighting it on the ground, you're dealing with the family issues, you're dealing with the friends looking at the companies that you're creating, and failure is a risk that you're facing every day.
No, I just wanted to comment on Majid. I think for creating outsourcing out of Lebanon, I don't think we have the scale. I've done that briefly. You get so much competition. I mean, our cost, we don't have the scale, and our cost structure is much higher than the countries that can do outsourcing. So you end up competing. I think what we need to do has to have a lot of added value, not just buddy rental. Like, as far as possible from buddy rental and as close as possible to very high added value for that to succeed. And there's a challenge.
Let me, if you don't mind, just Majid has actually put that as a challenge in front of the Labnet leadership, and we have yet to really discuss it. And for the reasons that you mentioned, there's some pros and cons. But let me just say one thing. We just need to move it up the stack. In other words, it's not pure outsourcing. It can be at a higher level of product development that could be done. And I think it's a valid idea. I think what Majid is really bringing here is there is probably an appetite, I'm guessing, I'm saying probably, from US-based Lebanese diaspora folks to invest in something like that rather than invest in other things. If there was, and not for return, but rather from the affinity of wanting to help. So that's one thing, it's a valid idea. One thing I want to say about the education, because it's a very important point, is that there definitely is a role for academia in Lebanon to play and how to tie, let's call it the industry and the startups and the entrepreneurs. I'll give an example. I won't name names, and it's not LAU, Dr. Jabra. I was talking to a Department of Engineering head, as a matter of fact, the head of the Department of Engineering of a very known university in Lebanon. and they wanted to know what should they do. And I said, do you know so-and-so? It was an entrepreneur from Lebanon who was making the rounds, getting all the sort of publicity and winning awards, very famous, if you wish, startup entrepreneur. And I said, do you know so-and-so? And he goes, no. And I said, this person graduated from your university. I'm sure this person would love it if you can send your senior class over and help them develop, because they're competing on a global scene. He just had no clue of that this is happening. Now, not their fault, but the point is, universities have to know who are the entrepreneurs in the country and start the conversations at least, and send their seniors, and they have to learn from them what are their needs so that they can educate the students to what the industry needs. There's a big gap right now. It has been there for a while. Some are doing a better job, but I think that's a very important problem. We're seeing that the quality of what a startup needs is not necessarily always available. We get very excited about the entrepreneurs themselves. They're very creative, very smart and all that, but they need teams. And it's the teams that are being hard to build right now, is from what I'm hearing anecdotally. And those are the ones we need to help. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but everybody wants to be a great engineer that can get hired by a lot of startups potentially, or a great finance person that can get hired by multiple startups. So I think we need to also build that, and the universities have a big role in that.
Can we run the video that Tony Fadel sent us, and then we'd like to open up the forum for questions from the audience.
To all the members of the Entrepreneurs Panel and the participants of the North America Lebanese Diaspora Conference, I'm sorry I couldn't be there today, but I hope this message will resonate with you, and I hope you're all having a great conference.
How can we strengthen the competitive advantages of the startup ecosystem in Lebanon to become a relevant regional hub in the Middle East?
So how can we truly make Lebanon a greater place for entrepreneurs and make more influence around the Middle East with our talents? And I think I first start with the fact that in Lebanon, it's been such a hub for so many different trades over the centuries. And so when we look at technology, what technology is great at is when it's applied to problems that are of that local area. And so every time I think about the Middle East, there are many problems that can be solved. The people in Silicon Valley, the people in Europe, the people around the world working on technology don't understand the problems that exist there, whether it's a financial system or whether it's just data communications, these kinds of things. So if you look inside, if you look at the problems, even if they're basic problems, and you solve those, that's the best way to have the most influence around the region. Silicon Valley doesn't know what's going on there, but you do. You should leverage the knowledge that we have in Silicon Valley or around the world, but bring it to and solve your local problems. Through that, then you can build bigger and bigger businesses. It doesn't always have to be the greatest and latest technology. It's just about in service of those problems. And so once you do that, though, and if you find novel ways, those same things could be applied to other parts of the world. If I look at what China's done, China has created all new ways of using technology that the US and Europe has never even thought of. I believe Lebanon, especially those entrepreneurs who've been so well educated at the universities there, can take that same technology and be a model, and people will want to bring it to other parts of the world, just like China has done. We're starting to see the seeds of those things being planted in Lebanon. I hope they grow and prosper to be able to become these big companies over time, just like they were started many centuries ago in different ways in trading. I think we can do the same thing in Lebanon if we have the support of the individuals around us with different startups, but also from the financiers, the central bank. These kinds of things are necessary to create an ecosystem to allow these seeds to really grow and thrive. Once the world sees a little bit of success, they're going to come calling, and they're going to help propel that to be bigger and better things in the world. And Lebanon will once again become a hub for technology, not just shipping technology or not other things, but true technology that solves problems, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. But you have to start local, then you go global.
Thank you so much.
So, there's all kinds of examples of successes. But I look and I've heard that and I'm going to see this for myself, but I've heard, not everyone has high-speed data, special high-speed data to their homes. How can you go off and make high-speed data happen? It might be standard in various other countries around the world. If we don't have high-speed data, that's something you could go and fix. You can fix together. It's highly profitable, very important, and it will allow other startups to grow on top of it. But if you don't have the infrastructure, you can create it. Don't wait for it. Create it yourself. Find the right things. Make it happen. You don't have to dig up the streets. You can do it with wireless. We have the technology. You just need to deploy it. You need the commitment to deploy it. I also look at the financial systems. There's so many different currencies. There's so many different things going on, people moving all around. What can you do with your financial systems? How can you change things? How can you make it much easier to move money around with transparency so that you can do it safely and you can make other people prosperous? Because if you can be prosperous, you need to make other people prosperous, and that will make you even more prosperous. So look at the data communications. Look at the fundamental infrastructures. Don't just look at social networks, these other things. Look at the fundamental things you can change your society to make it better, to make it really last so that other people can build on top of it and create even more successes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we have more questions for the panel, but I'd like to turn it over to the audience at this point. If you have questions, please.
Hi, my name is Doris Bitar, and I live in San Diego, California. And I teach at Cal State San Marcos art. I teach painting, drawing, design, installation. I have advanced degrees in what would arguably be called the most useless profession you could possibly have. I've been teaching for 21 years. I'm a gallery director, I'm a writer. I've worked in the public and private sectors, hotel in Beirut, the Kempinski Hotel has a piece of mine, and I make fine arts. It's painting, drawing, etc. So my students, one student asked me a year ago, why do we need this education? And in the past, I've heard it before, in the past I say, I just give them the kind of, you're going to be ahead of other people, but it doesn't account for, obviously, for experience, like you guys are talking about. But it does help you how to learn. And for the first time, I found myself telling my students, an education helps you learn how to learn and how to vet and to go on into your professions without gaps. As Lebanese people, in my family, my extended family, and my friends, we really honor the self-made person, the self-learned person. But that person has gaps. So when I hear the sort of disparaging, I hear, education is good, but it's also kind of pushed aside. I think it's just really important to understand that when you get an education, you might get out of your parents, your family way of thinking, and be able to advance. You might be in a zone where you can fail and learn these other things. In the arts, my frustration with this conference is that because I'm an artist, I actually want to meet with scientists because I feel like my studio is a lab. I work with materials, accidents happen, it's a chemistry lab. And I need to talk to people in the sciences, but the people in the sciences may not understand that. If I'm teaching Florentine painting, I need to know the physics of the molecules of pigments. And I think everybody needs to understand is to think a little more broadly, and I can't think of any other way but an education, and so I've heard a little bit of some disparaging comments about it, so I want to say education to get out from the myopia of your family and experience failure All these things are good things, you know.
I really don't know how you got that we're disparaging education.
It's pushed aside, not
No,
everyone.
no, we're not
pushed
pushing it aside. We're saying it's not sufficient to create startups. This is subject is about startups. If you want to talk about...
No, I understand that. I understand that. So anyway, your comments are welcome.
Helpful, thank you. There was a question in the front, please.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Salim Ayas. I come from Boston. I'm a senior civil engineer, currently working in the power generation sector. I want to say to Mr. Basile, His Excellency is the champion of this initiative in Lebanon to improve the power of Lebanon. And we are very thankful to His Excellency and Mr. Majdi Ramadan for making this diaspora as a reality, and we wish that we will repeat it more. My question is, in general, I like the sharing from the panels, especially those who started companies in Lebanon, and now they're moving to expand into the United States. Yours truly working currently for a large-size company, and we are talking to them about what the possibility of going to Lebanon and building hydropower plants, solar panels, or wind turbines, for example. So how can we convince them in making this move, given that there's still some security concerns? And I'd like if you could give us some more of your experiences, how you started it, and now you're moving to expand.
You guys did it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can speak for the software industry. I'm not sure what it would take for, for companies like yours to deploy hydraulic plants or hydropower plants. Yeah, but I'd say for any, you have to have Lebanon as a passion to want to do business or to want to start up in Lebanon, hire people in Lebanon and take the risk. Because all of the stuff that we've heard, power cuts, security, all that stuff we live with. So if you're not passionate about doing it in Lebanon, succeeding in Lebanon, changing things in Lebanon, there's no reason whatsoever to do business in Lebanon, especially with the numbers from the World Bank and all the other things that we know.
So let me answer your question.
So I'd like to, for all of you who are going to ask questions, if you can just get to the question very quickly, because we have only 20 minutes left, and I'd like to get to as many of you as possible.
Sorry, let me just answer your question very quickly on this. My company actually largest in the world in hydropower. We're the #1 in the hydropower in the world, 4 billion in revenue. And we build the largest dams, the tallest dams, the largest hydropower, whatever you can imagine in the world, we build it. We design it and build it. So we haven't done it in Lebanon, as I said. Lebanon is difficult to do business. You don't want to go to business. The payment terms are very difficult. So again, there's a lot of situation where the government can make the ease of doing business easier. When you do that, people will come. That's the key, is ease of doing business, and getting paid on time also is very important. That's something the beauty of this country here, people love to work here. You get paid within 30 days. That is very important. When you pay your employees, you don't tell them, oh, I'll pay you, 2 years when I get paid. You have to pay them, on a daily, on a monthly basis. Here we do it on a bi-weekly basis. There's a lot of things, that you have to do. But again, this is the government has to make the change. And I think, to be honest with you, I think our government in Lebanon, I think, our Excellency, the Excellency, when he was actually Minister of Water and Electricity, I believe you've done a magnificent job. And, but it takes, but it's a term that expires, and then he become a different, we have to maintain these situations. I'm building right now in Pakistan, for crying out loud, a huge hydropower, $11 billion, to give you an idea. And it's so easier to do business over there than do in Lebanon, with all due respect. That's this kind of thing. I just want to mention one thing about the education. education is, you know, if you look at the most important education, not just academics, is about the character, is about building the whole person. That's what's great education. That's what great university like LAU is doing, is building a great person. At the end of the day, leadership is all about character. That's what's going to build the next generation and the greatest Lebanese entrepreneurs and make Lebanon a great success. It's all about integrity and characters. That's what great university is building.
Thank you, Paul. Please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Salim Nujaim. I'm from Connecticut. Thank you so much, Your Honor. Welcome to the United States, and also to our Consul General. Thank you so much for helping us being here today. I love what I'm hearing, and I appreciate that very, very much. Our business started in Lebanon, and the concept was started in Lebanon, and we came here to Connecticut, and thank God we have been successful in manufacturing. But there are a couple fundamental problems that somehow we have to address and we have to take care of. Otherwise, everything that we are discussing in here will not really come to fruition. I'm also in politics, not very high, only at the state level in the state of Connecticut. A few years ago, I wanted to travel to Lebanon to see our family. The ambassador of the United States in Beirut said to me, I cannot allow you to come. I asked why, and the answer was, I cannot guarantee your security. Well, anyway, I defied that, and I went to Lebanon and had a great time. I really enjoyed it. But it's a problem, because out there in the outside world, they think that we are not a safe country, and it's something that we have to change. The second fundamental problem that we have, which really we have to address, and we have to address it very fast, is the fact every night I would like to sit down with my American-born wife and watch the Lebanese news at 8 p.m. in the evening. Every evening, the same two topics are very prevalent. And Nifayet, the garbage, and we have no presidents. And sometimes I'm truly ashamed to sit down with my American wife, to sit down and see all of this that is in Beirut and around the country, when I just want her to appreciate and enjoy and appreciate my native country and go with me to visit. And when I wanted to go, she just looked at me, she said, do you really want to go? This was just 3 days ago. So these are issues that we have to address. And unless we address them, our country will not be the capital of the world that we want it to be. Thank you.
We don't disagree with any of what you said. We're not equipped to answer it, though.
Hi. It's more of an answer than a question. I am previous Minister of Telecommunications of Lebanon, Nicolas Sehnawi. Just want to update you on a few projects that give a little bit of hope for the future of the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem in Lebanon. So we are developing a R&D center that should be up and running next year with the help of the central bank. RNC, Resource National Center, that is equipped to deal with, I hope we'll collaborate with Labnet, equipped to deal with the foreign corporations, major corporations that can outsource to Lebanon some of the programming or IT work, and an academy. This on top of the accelerator, incubator initiatives that are also sponsored by the central bank. So our ecosystem is young. We have a lot of problems in Lebanon, so I won't try to tell you that everything is perfect. You know, you're complaining, we all complain, but it takes a leap of faith. I mean, you know that we're in a tough area, and we have a lot of problems, and state building is one of the biggest problems we have. And His Excellency Minister Basil is fighting this fight every day. I used to fight it when I was at the ministry. Someday we'll win this fight and we'll build a state. In the meantime, it takes a leap of faith from the diaspora that want to help Lebanon, and from the Lebanese entrepreneurs, and from the few people in the administration or in the political spectrum that want to change things and make things happen. So things are happening. Central bank is one of the entities that is driving and pushing the ecosystem. And we have some nice announcements that we'll make next year. R&D Center is one of them, and NRC is one of them. And if we put our hands together with the diaspora, with Labnet, I think we can do wonders for our small country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm here from Canada. My name is Abdul Soraya. I'm not a technology expert, but just following up on what this ex-minister was saying, I'm asking the panel, until the political stability is reached in Lebanon, what can people like yourselves in the diaspora do to set up an economic free zone that's completely independent of external forces and political dynamics? Because I believe that that would be probably the best departure point, because we know that state building, as the gentleman just pointed out, is going to take a long time. But again, if you want, the number one, as you were saying, Dr. Bullis, is character integrity. You need the confidence. As you know, any application only works in a stable operating environment. And what can you guys do, or what is the Republic of Lebanon, Mr. Basile, prepared to do to have real input by people like these gentlemen and ladies in the technology field, perhaps sitting on committees to help build this durable economic free zone that allow for confidence building while the political stuff is being sorted out? Thank you.
Great question. I'm just going to take that for a second, because my personal experience, actually Habib and I met in 2004, I believe, at Columbia University, and he was doing a speech on technology investments. And I had just graduated from my executive MBA program. And we got to know each other, and I was actually looking, I had started my own company in New York, and I was looking to go open up an offshore center in India. And I had booked my tickets, and I had connected with a few partners, et cetera, from my prior work at Oracle. And I stopped by Habib's office, and we were just chatting, and I told him that I'm actually on my way to Lebanon and then to India to start the offshore center. And he asked, why wouldn't you do it in Lebanon? And being Lebanese, but had never worked in Lebanon, my first question is there any expertise in Lebanon for what we're looking for? He said, you'll be surprised what you'll find in Lebanon. So through connection that we made, I canceled my Indian trip, and I actually ended up hiring 3 engineers in my trip to Lebanon, and this was in 2005, right? What I've learned, and just to answer your question, what can we do? I would just simply say, just do it. Right? Like, don't wait for all of these wonderful programs to come around. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, right? I mean, there's a lot of outside influence in the country. But there's also a lot of talent. And it also takes someone who has a passion for the country to come in, roll up his sleeves, or her sleeves, and just invest their time and intellectual property in developing resources. It's that simple. We've faced power outages, we've faced, we probably pay 3 times more in terms of infrastructure costs than we would in India or Argentina or Brazil. It's part of the road, right? You have to be willing to accept it, and you have to always keep your mind on it's part of the greater good. Having done that, I would say every single account, we deal with a lot of large enterprises here in the US. Every time we're selling software, we get the same reaction. You developed the software where? In Lebanon? Wow, okay, we've never heard that before, right? But the power of the intellectual property, right, and the thought and the knowledge overcomes, from my experience, the instability of the country, right? And we just need to keep doing more of that. Like, we need more people that are willing to do that. It's going to be the diaspora that's going to help. Certain programs are going to help make it easier, like the circular, like some of these programs that we're talking about now in terms of the resource centers and what have you. So there's always room for a lot of improvements, but the simple answer is just go and do it, and you'll find ways to make it work.
Hi there. Thank you. My name is Jillian. I am the co-founder of an international nonprofit, and I'm probably one of the youngest people in this room. I want to thank Mr. Kairouz for this wonderful panel on startups. You guys talked about a couple of barriers, especially among Lebanese people. As a startup co-founder, I want to thank you for those reflections. But one thing I notice as I look up in front of me is a panel full of men. And I want you to comment on the culture that is also a barrier for young women to also be startup entrepreneurs. Because if you're talking about Lebanon, and if you are talking about half the population not getting access to the resources and the cultural diversity that allows them to lead, you're talking about no progress. So I would love for you to think about two major populations, women and young people, and how they can have access to the resources they need so that Lebanon can finally progress and our generation can take over. Thank you.
Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Let me answer your
this
question
one very
now.
quickly. But we actually, when I mentioned at the beginning that we have a handful or a dozen very exciting startups in Lebanon, I know of two that were founded and run by women, Instabeat and IABDAR's companies. They're both touring Silicon Valley right now, so they couldn't come, but they were invited on the panel. So thank you for bringing this up.
And let me, sorry, I just want to add, and the example that I used about the entrepreneur that is very famous and known was actually a young woman. And our organization, as a matter of fact, helped her a lot. And as a matter of fact, she now moved to the Bay Area, based there with operations in Lebanon. So you're absolutely, but the diaspora in that case is gender blind, I think. And we definitely want to help both.
Yeah. Let me give you the exact
and we should support
opposite
that
of what
because I
you
look
just
around
heard.
and it's like 70% men in this room.
Yeah, but let me give you the real numbers. I think you're missing a lot of numbers. I opened in Lebanon what is called it's for MED's Lebanon Advisory Board. It's from MED because I'm on the board of MED's, and also I chair that board called MED's Lebanon Advisory Board. As you know, MED's is in downtown Lebanon. And we created a program for entrepreneurship. And actually what we teach, the young people, how to get a business plan, how to start a business, all these kind of things. And we graduated over 800 now, just to give you an idea. The vast majority are women, just to let you know. You should be very proud of that. In fact, men's are a minority. Absolute minority, and many of them has been extremely successful. And by the way, the Lebanese government has been incredibly helpful. All this money, by the way, just to let you know, all the money I brought for this was all from the United States and from Europe. And this is in millions of dollars, just to let you know, for all this for MEDs in Lebanon. So I just, so again, the vast majority are women. What I mean by majority, that means over 75%, just to get So the men actually were a minority. And I created this program. I'd be happy to discuss it with you. It's a fantastic program. It's still in place. And, you can just go to MEDs and sign for it.
Let me compliment her. Next time we have a Lebanese diaspora, we should bring our children to this. They are the future. Remember, guys, they are the future. And I applaud you for what you're doing. Thank you.
The whole world is the future.
My name is Philippe Zer. I'm the founder of Growth Holdings. We're a real estate and development company. And the last 3 years, we started investing in technology development. I'm also the founder of Invest to Stay. It's an initiative to invest in startups in Lebanon. My question to you here today is, I see 7 panelists, success stories, 7 of them. And I think before we start talking about how we can help Lebanon, we should talk how can we connect in the USA. How can we take 7 success stories and create a necklace of success stories that can make a difference and really can influence the changes in Lebanon? So what are the steps are we going to take today? After the panel, are you guys going to work together? Are you going to sit together? Are we going to sit with you to have a pragmatic steps to move all these beautiful ideas together and take them to Lebanon and make a change and a difference?
Let me take a quick stab at this, and if anybody else wants to chime in. There's been a number of diaspora network organizations formed in the last few years. Labnet, that George is the president of, is one, where it's bringing Silicon Valley executives of Lebanese descent together. There's been another one in the finance world, Life, Lebanese International Finance Executives, doing exactly the same thing. Life and Labnet actually got together and created something in Lebanon called Lebanon for Entrepreneurs, which was a setup to do exactly what you're describing, connecting with Lebanese entrepreneurs, connecting them to their respective peers in Silicon Valley, connecting them to potential investors from the Life network. And this is an example of 2 diaspora organizations coming together and working with the ecosystems in Lebanon. But there are a lot of similar potential opportunities to do exactly the same. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on this, but I think that's an important point.
Well, we are working with a huge initiative in Lebanon with, in collaboration with the WPF and the UK Tech Hub to make a difference. And I find it here today, there's few organizations that I don't know about. We never connected, and I think the benefit of the LDE should be to connect, and not only to connect and listen to stories, but actually taking pragmatic steps here after today, tomorrow, after tomorrow, in order to put all these efforts together and make a difference. That's, yeah, I think, panel 4.
Great point.
Thank you.
We have 5 minutes left, or maybe 2 more questions.
My name is Bassam Nahas. I'm coming from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Proud of being Lebanese first, Canadian second. I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister for the opportunity he gave us to join the diaspora. And I just want to share with you my personal experience. I've left Lebanon approximately 50 years ago. I've never forgot my country. My better half is Canadian. My kids are all born in Canada, and they all hold Lebanese citizenship and passports. It's not what Lebanon could do for us, it's what we could do for Lebanon ourselves. I'm honored to meet so many members at an organization as such, and I was moved so much to the point that there's a pavilion for some of you who haven't gone to Lebanon last year or the year before. It's established in Batroun, and it represents approximately all international countries. There's the US immigrant home, now there is the Canadian immigrant home, there's the Australian. It's an international pavilion within walking distance. This is something from our experience, what we're gonna do with that, it's gonna be a museum for the Canadian, not for Nova Scotia alone. Mind you, it started with us, but it's for all Canadian. The history of the Lebanese in Canada and where they came from Lebanon and so on and so forth. We're gonna try to work with universities in Canada, how we could help our universities in Lebanon, scholarships, trade, how we could help our country as such. Maybe it's not the time that we could open up IT businesses in Lebanon from the various reasons that you've given, which are well respected, electricity, securities, and so on and so forth. But ladies and gentlemen, it's not the money that we need. We need peace. All we need, most of us and our ancestors left with no money, and they became millionaires and billionaires. Money doesn't make people, people make money. Don't give up on your country. What you're doing is very positive. We're sharing all that information when we go back of how successful the people are and how we're networking. Keep it up, you're on the right track, and thank you.
Two more questions.
Thank you. Hi,
the question quickly, please.
Oh, sure. My name is Jata. I'm a senior associate attorney at Mayor Brown, and we advise clients on inbound and outbound investments on the transactional side into the region and out of the region, including Lebanon. And I would say that in advising on deals from various parts of the world, the most complicated, and I've had the opportunity to work in the legal field in Lebanon and in the US, and I can say that the most complicated provision in any merger agreement, acquisition agreement, involving an acquisition or a sale in Lebanon are not the payment provisions, they're not the reps and warranties, they're the force majeure. And it's because of the security situation in Lebanon, it's because it's been going on for a long time, and it's because there does not seem to be, from a reasonable, pragmatic investor's point of view who's looking into the country as an investment opportunity, a short-term solution. And so my question really is, in my mind, and from my experience as an attorney, it's much easier to convince the reasonable, pragmatic investor who has the heart, the Lebanese heart, and perhaps the Lebanese background to invest in the country, because really the heart is where the home is, and so that plays an emotional, that sort of has an emotional component into the transaction and the drive behind the transaction. But what would I say, and as a Lebanese, I find myself often to be a champion for the country if the country is involved in the transaction. What would I say to a client who is a reasonable, pragmatic investor who has no emotional ties to the country per se, but is really looking for a reasonable, pragmatic investment in the country with short-sighted, with returns that are reasonable in scope
I'm
and time?
assuming this question is not for the panel, but for the delegation from Lebanon. So I'll let them answer it after the panel. Thank you.
Sure.
Bishop Gregory.
Thank you, Habib. Thank you for hosting this wonderful panel. Thank you, Minister Basile and Consul General Ramadan. I'd like to, it's not a question, but it's a plea for the poor of Lebanon. I work with Catholic Relief Services, which is the Caritas America, which works with the poor in 117 countries, and also with Caritas Lebanon. This is a question for investors and for bankers alike. There is something that's called impact investing, which everyone on the panel knows, and I'm sure many of you know. It's the idea where you make an investment where it impacts the most. And there's also something called microfinancing. We have a Nobel Prize winner from, I think, Pakistan, who, from maybe yes. But my point is that with the beautiful technology and the great minds of the Lebanese people, we can help a man who needs a cow and a goat for milk. We can help a woman who needs a sewing machine. We can help a person who needs a garage so that he can work on cars with loans of $500, $1,000. And those loans now with the technology can be made so that they would be securely paid back, so that a person is not giving away charity, he's giving a loan, and then that person can pick himself or herself up by his own bootstraps. I do hope that impact investing and microfinancing would be something that we can embrace so that all of the small villagers of Lebanon can have their share in the economic flowering of Lebanon. So thank you.
Can I make one comment?
Okay,
Can I just make one comment? Just one. Just like to make just one comment. Just give you to answer your question.
Quickly, Paul.
About 30 years ago, just to give you an idea, that there are great companies in Lebanon to invest in. About 30 years ago, unfortunately, I did not know Mr. Ali Misfair. I wish I knew him 30 years ago. If you are invested in his bank when he started 30 years ago, your $1 today worth $350. That's a better investment that you ever done. That's the kind of, there's a lot of companies like him. And so there's a lot of things to do in Lebanon. So don't, we shouldn't disregard this. All I'm trying to say is that the company that already established is great to invest in. To establish a new company, we need to have, especially when you go from outside, from the United States, or you need to be able to have the government to make it more easy to be able to do business and to do a startup. That's the whole thing, because startup, by the way, is not for everyone. You're going to work, there's something called the 130 hours a week. I went through this. I think every one of us went through this, the 130. And that's not for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. I went for this for 12 years, just to let you know. And I'm sure most of you went of it probably the same amount or a little less or even more. It takes hard work. And you're going to fail. You're going to fail many, many times. And the idea is that this is how you're going to learn from your failure and grow. That's why we need always the government to help in this kind of thing. And I think the government is going in the right direction. So we should ourselves be very constructive and help this government to say, look, we really like what you're doing. We want to be able to take the chance, at the same time, let you give you some ideas and feedback on how we're moving forward. But I tell you what, the most important thing is the universities are doing the right thing. AUB and LAU and all these universities, now they're doing the right direction. And we should support them and support the country.
Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you for the audience.